Ethan Voss adjusted the collar of his worn-out jacket and scanned the auction floor, his gaze flicking over the crowd of aliens and scavengers gathered in the dimly lit hall. The air smelled of ozone and engine grease, the scent of machines long past their prime. The Rintove auction house was always like this, noisy, unpredictable, and full of junk that only a desperate or foolish buyer would waste credits on. Ethan liked to think of himself as neither, but the promise of rare tech had lured him here yet again. A towering, insectoid auctioneer clacked its mandibles and motioned toward the next item. A floating platform drifted forward, carrying the rusted remains of a derelict ship. The crowd barely stirred. No bidding screens flickered to life. No murmurs of curiosity. Even to an untrained eye, the vessel was a wreck, its hull pitted with age, its structure partially collapsed. Lot 82, the auctioneer droned in its static-laced voice. Unregistered vessel. Estimated age, unknown. Origin, unknown. Damage, severe. Unresponsive to scans. Opening bid, 5,000 credits. Silence. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Unregistered, unknown, and resistant to scans? That alone made it interesting. He stepped closer, studying the hull. The metal bore no familiar insignia, no marks of ownership. More than that, it felt old. Not just decades or centuries, but impossibly ancient. A thick-skinned reptilian beside him scoffed. Waste of time. No data, no resale value. Another bidder, a wiry alien with bioluminescent veins, chuckled. Looks like it's been floating in deep space for a millennium. Whoever buys it is buying a coffin. Ethan ignored them. He'd learned to trust his instincts, and his instincts whispered that this wasn't just another piece of scrap. The surface had strange, interwoven patterns, worn with time but still visible. Not just damage, design. For 1,000, he said, raising his hand. The auctioneer paused, its compound eyes blinking. Opening bid is 5. 3,000, Ethan interrupted. Laughter rippled through the crowd. A few bidders turned away, already bored. The auctioneer hesitated, then clicked its mandibles in irritation. Accepted. No counteroffers came. The gavel struck. Sold. Ethan exhaled slowly. Either he'd just made the best purchase of his life, or he'd wasted 3,000 credits on a pile of metal fit for a scrapyard. The transfer was quick. The ship was towed to his hangar on Outpost 47, a remote station orbiting the edge of civilized space. By the time Ethan arrived, his mechanics had already started taking scans, but the results were as frustrating as before. No recognizable power source, no standard circuitry, nothing that fit known ship classifications. He stepped onto the boarding ramp, placing a cautious hand against the hull. The metal was cold, but not lifeless. More like something waiting. He didn't believe in ghosts, but this ship carried the weight of something unseen, something just beyond understanding. Inside, the corridors were narrow, the walls lined with a strange, dull alloy that absorbed light rather than reflected it. No control panels, no obvious cockpit, just silence and shadow. His boots echoed against the floor as he moved deeper, tracing the strange patterns carved into the walls. Then he found it, a sealed chamber, its doorway rimmed with what looked like circuitry but pulsed faintly, almost as if alive. His fingers brushed against the edge, and a spark of static jumped to his skin. The ship groaned a deep, resonant sound, and then a flicker of light, a single, pulsing glyph ignited on the door's surface, alien and unreadable, yet carrying an unmistakable message. Something inside was still awake. Ethan took a step back, heart pounding in his chest. The ship had been dead, lifeless, unresponsive. But now the door before him pulsed with an eerie glow, the glyph shifting as though aware of his presence. He had seen thousands of ship systems in his time, but nothing like this. This was neither a keypad nor a biometric scanner. It was something else. Cautiously, he pulled a small multi-tool from his belt and ran its scanner over the surface. The device flickered, then spat out static. No readings, no data, just a dead signal. Frustrated, he tried an old-fashioned approach. His fingers traced the glyph's surface, pressing against the center. The moment his skin made contact, a pulse of energy surged through his arm, sending a sharp tingling sensation up to his shoulder. The ship groaned again, metal shifting, and then with a soft hiss, the door opened. A breath of stale, pressurized air escaped from within. Ethan exhaled slowly and stepped inside. The chamber was unlike the rest of the ship. Where the outer corridors were stripped and dark, this room hummed with a low, steady power. Lines of faint luminescence traced the walls, forming a network of glowing veins that pulsed in time with an unseen rhythm. At the center of the room stood a single structure, a cylindrical core encased in interwoven layers of alloy, its surface marked with symbols he couldn't begin to decipher. And then it spoke. A voice, neither mechanical nor organic, filled the chamber. It was layered, overlapping, as if multiple voices spoke in unison, yet none belonged to a language Ethan recognized. His earpiece auto-translator word, struggling to keep up. Unit compromised restoration, initializing. Ethan stiffened. His gut told him to step back, leave, run, but he stayed rooted in place. The core brightened, light coalescing into a shifting, humanoid figure. It hovered just above the ground, its form fluid, adjusting, stabilizing. Two glowing eyes, deep and unreadable, locked onto him. Who? The voice fractured, recalibrated. Identify. Ethan swallowed, forcing himself to keep his voice steady. Ethan Voss. Mechanic. I bought this ship at auction. Silence stretched. Then, incorrect. A chill ran down his spine. What do you mean, incorrect? The figure flickered, its form sharpening. This vessel was never meant to be found. Ethan's fingers twitched toward his holster. He wasn't sure what good a plasma pistol would do against a sentient energy construct, but instinct told him to be ready. Well, I did find it, and you are. A pause. Then the voice shifted, growing steadier. Designation, Vela 13. Last operational cycle, undocumented. Primary function, historical archive, tactical advisor, strategic warfare analysis. Current status, degraded. Systems incomplete. Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. An AI, an ancient one, by the sound of it. That alone was enough to make this ship more valuable than anything he'd ever salvaged. If this was what it claimed to be, he could sell it for a fortune. But something in the way Vela 13 had said never meant to be found unsettled him. He took a slow step forward. What happened to this ship? To you? The AI hesitated. Data corruption. Incomplete logs. Estimation. This vessel was part of a last effort to preserve knowledge before total systemic collapse. Collapse of what? The founders. My creators. Their civilization. Ethan frowned. He had studied galactic history, knew the dominant empires, the fallen factions. But no record existed of an ancient, hyper-advanced society leaving a ship like this behind. Never heard of them. You would not have. Vela 13's voice darkened. They were erased. A pulse ran through the room, and suddenly the chamber flickered with projected images, fleeting, fragmented glimpses of massive structures lost to time, of celestial bodies wreathed in artificial rings, of ships unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Then fire, explosions tearing through the void, a fleet crumbling into nothingness. The projection cut out as abruptly as it began, and Vela 13 dimmed. This knowledge was meant to be safeguarded. My activation poses a risk. Ethan crossed his arms, trying to keep his thoughts from spinning out of control. If this AI held the records of an entire lost civilization, it was priceless. But the way it spoke, its cautious tone, the fractured memories, suggested something else lurked beneath the surface. You keep saying risk. Who's the threat? Another pause. This time, it felt deliberate. External forces sought to erase the Founder's existence. If my signal is detected, it is likely they will come again. Ethan's breath hitched. He had activated something bigger than he understood, a relic not just of history, but of war. If this was true, if something out there still hunted whatever knowledge Vela 13 carried, then he had just put a target on his back. A low hum rippled through the ship, a deep vibration that he felt in his bones. Containment failing, Vela 13 intoned. Primary functions restoring. External presence detected. Ethan's stomach twisted. What kind of presence? The AI's eyes burned brighter. Unknown, but it is searching. For the first time, Ethan regretted placing that bid. Ethan barely had time to process the warning before the ship's hull vibrated with a sound he hadn't heard before, a deep, resonant pulse, like a distant thunderclap trapped inside metal. Every instinct screamed that something was coming. Define searching, he demanded, fingers tightening around his holster. Vela 13 flickered, its form unstable for a fraction of a second before solidifying again. Residual energy signature from my activation has propagated beyond the vessel. Detection likely. Origin unknown. That wasn't good. Ethan had worked on enough ships to know that even the smallest signal could be traced, and if whatever erased Vela 13's creators still existed, he'd just announced their survival to the galaxy. How long until... The ship's proximity alarms howled to life. Ethan spun toward the nearest console. The screens, dead since he had first boarded, now flickered erratically. He toggled the manual override, forcing the external sensors online. The grainy display struggled to process the incoming data before spitting out something worse than he'd expected. Ships, 3 of them, no transponders, no markings, just dark, angular hulls gliding through space with the slow, predatory patience of something that had already found him. Unidentified vessels approaching fast, Ethan muttered, clenching his jaw. Can't be a coincidence. Confirmed, Vela 13 said. Composition and trajectory matched known patterns from historical conflict archives. Estimated probability of hostile intent. High. Of course it was. Ethan didn't wait for a diplomatic solution. He bolted for the cockpit, slamming his hand against the control panel. Engines that had been dormant for centuries coughed in protest, but responded. Power surged unevenly, systems flickering in and out. They're charging weapons, Ethan growled, watching the display. The lead ship flared red, an unmistakable targeting lock. He grabbed the throttle. I assume this ship has defenses? Negative, Vela 13 replied. Original armament, removed prior to containment. Primary functions, preservation and data storage. Ethan swore under his breath. So, we're flying a library into a firefight. Correction, a target into a firefight. Not helping. The first blast struck before he could react. The ship lurched violently, the impact sending a shudder through the hull. Shields, if there had ever been any, were non-existent. He didn't need an AI to tell him they wouldn't survive another direct hit. Vela, he barked. Anything you can give me to work with. A hesitation. Then, emergency propulsion system detected. Secondary drive requires manual activation. Where? Lower deck. Aft section. Ethan cursed again but didn't argue. The ship groaned as another blast seared past its side, missing by inches. He pushed off, sprinting through the corridors, feet pounding against the metal floor. The lower deck was darker than the rest, its walls lined with machinery that looked more organic than mechanical. Fluid lines, interwoven plating that pulsed like veins beneath the surface. In the center stood a console unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't just a control panel. It was a conduit humming with barely contained energy. Vela, what am I looking at? Prototype gravitic propulsion system. Technology classified under Founder's Directive. Requires manual interface to engage. Classified? Ethan's fingers hovered over the console. The ship trembled again, the next blast closer. Do I look like I care about clearance? No. Proceeding with override. The panel flared to life, symbols shifting, rearranging. Ethan followed instinct rather than logic, pressing his palm against the center. A surge of power coursed through the ship. The lights flickered, then flared brilliantly. The floor beneath him vibrated, a deep hum rising from within the hull. Then, without warning, the ship moved. Not the sluggish, burning acceleration of standard thrusters. This was something else entirely. The viewport display in the cockpit blurred as the stars twisted. The pursuing ships were there one moment, gone the next. Space itself folded inward, wrapping around them, stretching, and then silence. Ethan stumbled against the console, breath ragged. The ship was no longer shaking. The alarms had stopped. Status, he rasped. Hostile vessels no longer in pursuit. Estimated distance. Uncharted sector. Ethan dragged a hand down his face. He had no idea how far they had just traveled, only that they had escaped. For now. He exhaled, forcing his mind to steady. They found us fast, Vela. Faster than they should have. Affirmative. The AI's glow dimmed slightly. A pre-existing detection system may have remained operational. My activation likely triggered an automated alert. Ethan didn't like the sound of that. If there was a beacon, if something had been waiting for the ship to wake up, then their escape was only temporary. They hadn't just run. They had been marked. Great, he muttered. So, what's the next move? Vela 13's form shifted, its gaze unreadable. We find out who's hunting us, and why they never wanted me to wake up. Ethan nodded slowly, jaw set. He had gone from scavenger to fugitive in a matter of hours. But there was no turning back now. Something ancient had awakened, and the galaxy was already moving to silence it. Ethan sat in the dim glow of the cockpit, eyes fixed on the swirling void outside. The ship drifted in uncharted space, its system stabilizing after the impossible jump. For the first time since he'd laid eyes on this relic, silence settled over him. Not the tense, expectant kind, but the heavy, uncertain weight of a man who had stumbled into something far beyond his control. Vela 13 materialized beside him, its ethereal form pulsing faintly. Systems fully recalibrated, energy reserves at 58%, structural integrity holding. Ethan exhaled through his nose, rubbing his temples. Good. Now tell me what's really going on. The AI's form flickered, as if considering. Clarify query. You know what I mean? He turned in his seat, leveling his gaze at the projection. We weren't just running from some opportunistic raiders back there. They knew exactly what they were looking for. You said your creators were erased. But something out there remembers, don't they? Vela 13 hesitated. Then, yes, Ethan leaned forward. Ooh. A pause. Unknown. That's not good enough. He gestured to the stars outside. I just burned every bridge I had jumping into the abyss with you. So if I'm risking my life, I need to know why. The AI dimmed, then slowly began to project something in the air between them. A map, ancient and fragmented, unfurled like a celestial tapestry. It showed no modern hyperlanes, no familiar territories, only vast stretches of space marked with symbols Ethan had never seen. These were the dominions of the Founders, Vela 13 said. Their knowledge spanned millennia, their reach extending beyond the known edges of your current star charts. The map shifted, sections disappearing as it burned away. Then, without warning, an external force moved against them. Not to conquer, not to negotiate, to erase. The image darkened. Silhouettes of ships, enormous and angular, blotted out the starlight. Then destruction. Entire worlds breaking apart, entire systems vanishing. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Who the hell could do that? He muttered. That knowledge was lost, Vela 13 admitted. Only fragments remain. But their intent was clear. No traces, no survivors, no records. A war not for territory, but for silence. Ethan watched the last remnants of the projection fade. Except for you, The AI's glow pulsed. Yes, I was created as a failsafe, a last attempt to preserve what they were. It paused. That is why I was hidden. That is why they will come again. Ethan let out a slow breath, tapping his fingers against the armrest. The weight of the choice ahead settled on him like a crushing force. He could see the path before him. Run, sell what little he'd learned, disappear into the backwaters of the galaxy. Or he could do something about it. He scoffed at the thought. You know, I'm just a mechanic. I fix things. I'm not some hero. A designation does not define one's impact, Vela 13 replied. The founders were not warriors, yet they fought. Not soldiers, yet they resisted. They understood that knowledge itself is a weapon. Ethan dragged a hand down his face. This was insane. He had no army, no allies. Hell, he barely had a working ship. But if Vela was telling the truth, then this was bigger than him. Bigger than credits or survival. What do you want me to do? Vela 13 regarded him for a moment. Restore the truth. Seek the missing fragments. And decide whether history repeats or is rewritten. Ethan let the silence hang between them. Then, finally, he nodded. All right, he said. Let's start with the first piece.